A police officer thought he'd pulled over just another nameless black woman on a lonely road. What he didn't know, she was a high-ranking U.S. Navy officer, and his whole system was about to shake. That night, the southern highway outside Lexington was unusually quiet. An early rain had left streaks of water smear across the road, reflecting the dim, flickering glow of yellow streetlights. The clock read 11:17 p.m. Lieutenant Commander Ava Matthews had been driving for nearly 2 hours, crossing long stretches of interstate. She was in uniform, just a simple black sweater, jeans, and her hair tied back in a neat bun. To a passerby, she was just another black woman driving late at night. But Ava had never been ordinary, and tonight that truth would soon be tested. In her rear-view mirror, flashing red and blue lights suddenly appeared, rushing toward her like an arrow. Ava frowned slightly, her chest tightening, not from fear, but from recognition. She knew this kind of situation. She'd heard about it. She'd trained for it. But when it actually happens, it always feels different. She flicked on her turn signal, gradually slowed down, and pulled over to the shoulder. Her hand stayed on the wheel, motionless and clearly visible. Her breathing was steady, a survival reflex sharpened since her earliest days in the service. The patrol car stopped just behind her. Its high beams cut through the night, glaring through the side mirrors. Ava tilted her head slightly, peering into the passenger side mirror. A figure stepped out, tall, with deliberate heavy steps, as if walking a role he knew too well. A shiny name tag gleamed on his chest. Sergeant K. Henson. License and registration, he said, his voice flat and cold. No greeting. No explanation. Just a command. Ava slowly opened the glove compartment, retrieved the documents, and handed them through the window. Is there a reason you pulled me over, officer? Henson glanced toward the rear of her car. Your taillight's out. Ava's brow furrowed slightly. I just checked it not long ago. You arguing with me? He cut her off, squinting, a smirk of irritation flickering at the corner of his mouth. In that moment, Ava knew exactly what this was. It wasn't about the taillight. It wasn't about safety. This was a power play, and she was the target. Step out of the vehicle, Henson ordered. She took a slow breath, cold, controlled, but in her eyes there was no fear, only a sharpened readiness. Ava Matthews stood beside the road, one hand still on the wheel, her gaze calm, as if measuring each word. She didn't react immediately, just tilted her head slightly. I have the right to know the reason for that order, she said, her voice firm and clear. Sergeant Kyle Henson curled his lip. The reason? Because I said so. Now step out, or I'll consider this resisting. In that moment, the air seemed to thicken. Ava knew exactly what she was up against. A white officer on a deserted highway, no witnesses, and she, a black woman, even as a high-ranking naval officer, was not immune to prejudice. She slowly opened her door and stepped out, keeping both hands clearly visible. I'm not resisting. I'm simply exercising my right to an explanation. Henson scoffed. Then you're already resisting. And with a sharp click, cold steel cuffs clamped tight around her wrists. Ava clenched her teeth as her arms were yanked behind her, the metal biting into her skin. Each ratchet of the cuffs echoed sharply in the night. You're abusing your authority, she said, still trying to stay calm. Think whatever you want, Henson replied, dripping with sarcasm. Now sit still in the car while I teach you a lesson in respect. He shoved Ava into the back seat of the patrol car. Her back slammed into the hard plastic bench, her shoulder hitting the door, deliberately rough. She sat upright, eyes fixed forward, arms going on behind her from how tightly the cuffs were secured. The patrol car sped off into the night. The red and blue lights kept flashing, casting shifting shadows on the roof and painting her thoughts in colors she wished she could forget. Drills back at the base, deployments overseas, places where she thought she'd already faced her toughest battles. But no, the real fight was here, on home soil. Who do you think you are? Henson's voice barked from the front seat. Think being some officer gives you the right to tell me how to do my job? Ava said nothing. She knew anything she said now could and would be twisted. But deep down, she had already decided. Tonight, She would not bow. She would remember every detail. And she would not let this disappear into silence. Henson's patrol car veered off the main highway and onto a narrow, pitch-black road. No street signs. No lights. Just sparse pine trees and shadows swallowing the path ahead. Ava tilted her head, eyes sweeping the window. She noted everything. The curves in the road, the license plates they passed, the uneasy rhythm of Henson's driving. Through the rear-view mirror, Henson sneered at her. "What? Think someone's coming to save you." He let out a low laugh. Nobody cares about some black woman in the middle of the night, especially not when she's resisting like this. Ava stayed silent. She knew. Any response now would be used against her. She'd learned that from too many stories, too many headlines where the victim's name barely made the news. "You should be grateful," Henson added, his voice dark and mocking. "I'm going easy on you. Someone else might have made sure you disappeared, and no one would have known." She steadied her breath. Her hands throbbed behind her back, but her mind had never been clearer. To Henson, Ava was just a black woman driving alone at night. No authority, no weapon, no one to vouch for her. But the one thing he got wrong was the kind of woman he was dealing with. "I've stood in front of armed men beyond our borders," Ava said, her voice cold as steel. "And I've never feared the stare of a man who only thinks he holds power." Henson leaned forward, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. "You'd better watch your mouth." Ava met his eyes in the rear-view mirror. "No, you're the one who should start watching yours." In that moment, even behind bars, Ava did not appear small. She seemed to shrink the very space inside the vehicle. And for the first time, Henson saw something in her eyes he couldn't control. True strength. The police station came into view after a sharp turn. The building loomed beneath a flickering overhead light, casting a cold glow onto the faded metal sign above the door. Ava closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them, sharper, clearer, as if she hadn't come here to fear. She had come to fight. The steel door slammed shut behind her, the echo ringing out like a final punctuation on her stolen freedom. She stepped into the intake hallway, lined with scuffed tiles, reeking a harsh disinfectant mixed with stale coffee and damp paper. Sergeant Henson didn't speak. He tossed her file onto the desk like it was nothing, resisting arrest. Put her in room 2. Ava said nothing. No pleading eyes. No rebuttal. She stood tall, gaze steady like tempered steel. "Anything to declare?" the younger officer at the desk asked, voice flat. Ava looked him square in the eye. "I want to contact my attorney, and I need to notify my military command." The officer paused, eyes narrowing. "Military command?" "Lieutenant Commander Ava Matthews," she said, her tone crystal clear, each word landing like a hammer on steel. "United States Navy Reserve, East Coast Defense Fleet. Service number 317-54 CG-22. The room fell silent. Henson turned slightly. The smirk he'd worn earlier twitched into something else, an uncomfortable crease at his temple. Ava didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to fight with fists. Her truth, her rank, was the sharpest blade in the room. While the desk officer began typing her information into the system, Ava slowly stepped toward a metal bench by the wall. She sat down with composure, as if this were a briefing room, not a holding cell. Just minutes later, the desk phone rang. The officer picked it up, nodded slowly, and turned to Henson with an expression that had completely changed. "They've confirmed it. She is a commissioned military officer, and she has the right to request military legal representation." Ava didn't need to smile, but the look she gave Henson was enough to make his heart skip half a beat. She didn't need to shout that he was wrong. The law was already saying it for her. The phone rang again. This time, no one hesitated. The desk officer grabbed it instantly, but he barely got a few words in before the blood drained from his face. "Yes, I understand," were reported immediately. He slowly placed the receiver down, then turned to Henson, his eyes wide with alarm and warning. "Henson, someone from the Pentagon just called. They've been notified of an unauthorized arrest of a senior Navy officer in Lexington. They're asking why there's been no official report filed to the federal system." The air in the room thickened. Henson opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His throat was bone dry. The Pentagon? That's not all, the officer added, flipping open a logbook. The regional military legal liaison is en route. Looks like someone in the Department of Defense has intervened. Personally, Ava remained seated, spine straight, composed like someone who had never been broken. She turned to Henson and, for the first time in nearly 30 minutes, spoke. I told you. There are people I don't have to call. They'll come on their own. Henson tried to steady himself, but the veins in his temples pulsed visibly. He spun around and stormed into a small office in the back. The door slammed shut behind him, but his voice leaked through the thin walls. God damn it, how the hell does she have this much pull? Back in the intake area, the energy shifted. The eyes around the station turned toward Ava, not with the usual indifference reserved for detainees, but with a mix of awe and apprehension. A few younger officers silently pulled out their phones, clearly Googling her name. And when the screen filled with images, Ava Matthews in uniform, medals pinned to her chest, standing beside a vice admiral. The room fell completely silent. The night at the Lexington Police Department had never felt longer for Kyle Henson, and this was only the beginning. The next morning, Courtroom 3 at the Kentucky County Courthouse was unusually crowded. The gallery benches were packed. Law enforcement officers, attorneys, reporters, and a few quiet faces in Navy uniforms sat observing. Morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting soft reflections on the polished wooden floor. Ava Matthews entered the courtroom with her back straight, wearing a simple yet commanding black suit. Her hair was neatly tied back, her face calm, her gaze cool and deliberate as it swept across the room before she took her seat beside her military counsel, Major Jonathan Reyes, a short but formidable man whose name carried weight in many civil courtrooms. Across the aisle, Sergeant Kyle Henson no longer bore his usual arrogant demeanor. His uniform seemed to press down on him, stiff and constricting. His private attorney whispered something into his ear, but it was clear Henson wasn't listening. His eyes remained locked on the monitor to his left. All rise. The clerk's voice rang out. Judge Boone presiding. Judge Clarence Boone, of Puerto Rican descent and known for her no-nonsense courtroom presence, entered holding a thin case file. She took her seat and glanced over both sides before speaking directly. We're not here for theatrics. I've reviewed the case materials. I now want to view the footage from the defendant's body cam. The video began to play. The room fell completely silent. From the moment patrol lights came on, Ava's hands visible on the steering wheel, her calm voice asking for a reason, to the moment she was pulled from the car and handcuffed without any sign of resistance. Henson's voice rang clearly. I told you, because I said so. The footage shook slightly as Henson pushed Ava into the patrol car, without reading her Miranda rights. Ava never resisted. She only asked once, what am I being arrested for? When the video ended, a heavy silence settled over the courtroom. Attorney Reyes stood. Your Honor, along with the footage, we've submitted Commander Ava Matthews' full military record, former Rapid Response Unit Commander in Asian waters, formally commended by the United States Navy for courage and integrity over 15 years of service. No criminal record, no traffic violations, no internal reprimands. Judge Boone nodded slightly, her eyes now focused on Henson. Sergeant, do you have anything to say? Henson rose, swallowing hard. I thought she was being combative. Boone leaned forward, hands on the bench. A combative attitude is not grounds for arrest, especially not when the individual in question has served this country for over a decade. She paused deliberately before delivering her ruling. This court dismisses all charges against Commander Matthews. Furthermore, I am ordering a formal investigation into Sergeant Henson's conduct, to be led by the Office of Internal Affairs. The judge's gavel struck the bench. Crack! In that moment, all Kyle Henson could do was lower his head. That morning, the Kentucky County Police Department headquarters was unusually quiet. News of the previous day's hearing had spread like wildfire. Headlines screamed, Officer arrests wrong person. True identity leaves courtroom in silence. Some local papers even feature a photo of Ava in full Navy uniform, quoting Judge Boone, "This is not defiance. This is integrity." On the second floor of the precinct, the door to the Internal Affairs captain's office creaked open. "Sergeant Henson, come in." The voice of Lieutenant Colonel Raymond Tully, head of Internal Affairs, was calm but firm. He sat behind a desk, holding a thick case file in his hand. Henson stepped inside, his usual swagger gone. The sharp glare that once never left his eyes now flickered, uncertain. His hands fumbled for a place to rest. The door shut behind him with a decisive click, and the room felt instantly heavier. "Sit." Raymond gestured toward the chair across from him, but his tone wasn't inviting. Henson sat down, fingers laced together, trying to maintain composure. Raymond opened the file, eyes still fixed on the pages. "You know what this investigation is about, don't you?" "Yes," Henson replied quietly. "For arrests in the past 6 months, all involving black citizens. 2 of those individuals showed no clear violations. One of them was Lieutenant Commander Ava Matthews." He placed a printed internal report on the table. "Your traffic stop records show that 82% of the drivers you pulled over were people of color. Care to explain that?" Henson froze. "I was following instinct. There were signs of suspicious behavior." "Suspicious behavior or personal bias?" Raymond cut in, his eyes sharp as ice as they finally met Henson's. Henson said nothing. Raymond closed the file. "As of today, you are suspended from duty. Internal Affairs will continue its investigation. If we uncover further procedural violations or signs of systemic discrimination, your case will be forwarded to the State Disciplinary Board." This isn't fair," Henson muttered through clenched teeth, his voice tight with frustration. "Unfair?" Raymond raised an eyebrow. "You think arresting a senior military officer just because she wasn't obedient is fair?" He didn't wait for a response. Raymond stood, walked to the door. "Clear out your locker. Turn in your badge and firearm. I want everything wrapped up by 5 o'clock. When the door slammed shut behind Henson, the entire hallway seemed to fall silent. A few colleagues stood at a distance, quietly watching him walk past. No one spoke. No one reached out. The price of abusing power was the silence of the very system that once enabled him. The Lexington morning was bathed in golden sunlight, but Ava Matthews barely noticed. She was seated at a small roadside cafe, the aroma of espresso blending with the quiet murmur of regulars chatting over their cups. Her phone buzzed nonstop on the table. Calls from reporters, a local TV station requesting a live interview, invitations from civil rights organizations. Ava didn't answer. She just stirred her black coffee gently, eyes watching the flow of people rushing by outside. On the table lay the morning newspaper, folded open to the front page. "Military officer wrongfully arrested. Police system under scrutiny." Below the headline was her photo in full Navy uniform, gaze firm and proud. But Ava didn't smile when she saw it, not because she was displeased, but because she never fought for applause. When Major Jonathan Reyes, her military attorney, entered the cafe, Ava had already ordered his usual latte. Jonathan dropped his bag beside the chair and glanced at her buzzing phone. "Still not planning to go on camera?" Ava took a sip and shrugged. "I don't need a spotlight or a public apology. I just needed him to know the law still exists." "He knows," Jonathan said with a soft chuckle. "The whole Kentucky PD knows." Ava nodded. A truth brought into the light doesn't need to be shouted. It needs to be unwavering. Across the street, a group of high school students passed by. One black girl broke away, paused at the cafe window. When Ava's eyes met hers, the girl gave a quick nod, then ran to catch up with her group. Ava smiled just slightly, but that smile carried more weight than any headline ever could. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need to humiliate Henson in front of cameras. His silence in the hearing, the way he lowered his gaze, the investigation on his record, that was enough. Ava stood, placed her Navy cap on her head, and stepped out of the cafe. A new day was beginning, and she was due back at base in a few hours. Behind her, the world was still talking, but Ava didn't look back, because she didn't need public validation to know she'd done the right thing. She just needed the law to be upheld. And for her, that was enough. In less than 48 hours after her release, the name Ava Matthews had spread across every major national media outlet. Evening news broadcasts, social media platforms, and digital headlines buzzed with titles like Navy Officer Wrongfully Arrested in Racial Profiling Incident, Body Cam Footage Exposes a Truth, Ava, the silent woman who made the system bow. At the East Coast Defense Fleet Naval Reserve Base, the office phone rang nonstop. Colonel Denise Rowland, Ava's direct commanding officer, was already reorganizing his schedule after receiving a call from the Department of Defense. He moved swiftly down the corridor, a file folder marked Matthews, A, tucked tightly under his arm. On the way to the conference room, he leaned toward his assistant and said quietly, "They want her to be the face of a new national training initiative on police conduct and citizen rights, not just for the military, countrywide." Meanwhile, Ava was at home, sitting on the second-floor balcony, the late afternoon sun casting a warm glow across the shoulders of her gray T-shirt. Her phone buzzed nonstop. An email from the ACLU, an invitation to speak at Howard University, and a message from the Lexington mayor's office requesting her attendance at a community honor ceremony. Ava skimmed through them, but her heart remained quiet, just like the way she had chosen to face Henson. Calm, composed, without spectacle. She knew what she had endured wasn't unique. Out there, countless others had been pulled over, interrogated, handcuffed, without cameras, without lawyers, without a commanding officer calling in the middle of the night to demand justice. Jonathan Reyes called again. "Ava, if you speak up just once, it could change training policy at hundreds of police departments. You have a chance to do that." Ava looked out at the front yard, where the neighbor's kid was riding his bike in the amber light. She sat in still thought. She never wanted to be a symbol. But now, she understood. Her silence had already shattered a lie. And if her voice could protect someone else in the future, maybe it was time to speak. 1 week after the trial, Lexington City Hall was packed. Not because of celebrity appearance or some major celebration, but because of one woman, Ava Matthews, who chose silence at the right moment and spoke at the exact time it mattered most. Standing behind a simple podium, Ava wore her formal Navy uniform, ribbons and medals glinting softly under warm stage lights. She didn't need to shout or deliver a fiery speech. The room fell silent the moment she began. "I'm not here to tell my story," Ava began, her voice low and steady. "I'm here for the thousands who've been pulled over without cause, for those handcuffed without the chance to speak, for those who sat in silence, afraid, unheard, and unbelieved." A quiet cough echoed from the back row, but no one looked away. "I used to believe that if I just did the right thing and stayed silent, the system would fix itself. I was wrong. Silence never corrects injustice. Silence only empowers the abuser." She paused, eyes locking on the row where local law enforcement officers sat. Unchecked power is abused power. And when that happens, we can't just watch. The first round of applause came from a black mother in the front row, holding her young son. Then another, and soon the entire hall erupted like a rising tide. Not in celebration of victory, but in recognition of truth finally spoken aloud, and for the woman who stood up for the thousands who never had the chance. After the ceremony, Ava stepped outside into the soft golden light of dusk. A young reporter hurried after her, calling out, "Lieutenant Matthews, do you think you've won?" Ava stopped, looking into the distance, where children were playing near the fountain, carefree and unafraid. "No," she answered, "I haven't won. But I spoke up, and I won't be the last." Then she turned and walked away, quietly but firmly, just like how change always begins. Not with a bang, but with an unshakable resolve that refuses to bend.